Shot clock inside 10. Nollie sees a seam. Got it to go.
What a tough move and tough finish by Landers Nollie. So Gabe Brown was right with Couture.
Nollie. Oh! Yes! Landers Nollie with a three.
You have got to be kidding me. That's an ice water three. What a win for Virginia Tech.
Wow.
What a win for Virginia Tech.
Mike Young with an enormous win as the Hokies pull off a big-time upset and defeat Michigan.
Hello, Tech fans, and welcome into another edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast, recording on Wednesday, November 27th. And wow, do we have a lot to get to today on the TSL Podcast. We will be previewing the Commonwealth Cup, Virginia and Virginia Tech. We're talking Hokie hoops, an upset over Michigan State, a loss to Dayton, what to make all of that, and an update on Olympic sports. That's all coming up on the Tech Sideline Podcast. Again, whether you're watching live or archived, we're so glad you could join us on Wednesday, November 27th. Same crew as always. Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes producing on the podcast set. Tech Sideline managing editor Chris Coleman, our founder and head honcho Will Stewart. I'm your podcast host Evan Hughes. A reminder that this week and every week, the Tech Sideline Podcast is presented by the Fisher Law Firm, Virginia's trusted DUI and traffic defense firm, dedicated to defending individuals charged with traffic-related offenses. From their offices in Blacksburg and Roanoke, the Fisher Law Firm has handled cases throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. They have also defended more than 30,000 people charged with a moving violation. For a free consultation, call anytime, day or evening, toll free at 1-800-680-7031. Again, that's 1-800-680-7031, or you can email them at info@fisherlegal.com.
All right, so warning everybody, today's podcast is unprofessional. We are going to take a pizza delivery in the middle of the podcast since it's lunchtime.
It is lunchtime.
Yeah.
We are recording not at our normal time, at around 12:15 on Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Right.
So the day before. First of all, before we dive in, just want to say happy Thanksgiving to you guys. Awesome to be doing the podcast the day before Thanksgiving. Feeling really thankful to be here in the TSL studio. Thankful about the podcast and TSL having a great year. Just it's a good time.
Yes. It's been a good, up until last night, the loss to Dayton, but we're not going to talk about that. Maybe we will talk about it.
I'm feeling thankful that we have a lot to talk about the day before. Seriously, this is one, I think, the more packed podcast we're going to have.
It's that time of year, man. I mean, it
a lot of different sports going on.
Yeah.
It gets hard to do this job this time of year with everything that's going on, and then you throw Thanksgiving into it. So
it's right in the middle. Okay,
it's a lot.
So before we get going, I do have to ask, because I envision a lot of people either watching or listening to the podcast. They're either going to be traveling to Thanksgiving tonight on Wednesday. Maybe they're listening tomorrow and their travel on Thanksgiving. Maybe they're listening to us on the way to Scott Stadium on Friday. So since Thanksgiving is the center, I have to ask, what is your favorite Thanksgiving thing to get in the Thanksgiving buffet line? Let me put it that way. Like, what do you most enjoy about
Thanksgiving food?
There you go. Favorite Thanksgiving food. Like, what does Chris Coleman just say? God, I can't wait for this on Thanksgiving.
It's kind of a unique answer, but I don't necessarily know. A lot of times I don't really have a Thanksgiving because it's UVA week, and I can't cook. So it's been so long. Whether it's Christmas, Thanksgiving, or whatever, my answer is a little unique. I would say deviled eggs. Love deviled eggs. Yeah.
Okay. You want to come over to my house? We got room this year.
No, I'm sleeping until the clock says
PM.
Yeah,
because Tech plays at
11 o'clock tonight against BYU.
11:30.
11:30 tonight, so the game will end at 1:30, assuming it doesn't go to overtime, which watch it go to triple overtime. And then so you start writing up the recap and everything, but you have to wait for
the quotes
to get emailed to you and everything like that, and that can take anywhere as much as an hour after the game. Yeah. So the recap will come out about 3 a.m. Thanksgiving morning.
Oh goodness! All right, good enough.
How about you, Will?
I like stuffing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's. I know that's weird, but that's my favorite part. I think turkey's so incredibly overrated.
I completely agree with you, Will.
You know,
yes.
And this is a thing that is starting to surface about Thanksgiving, is that people are starting to say, you know what, the whole turkey thing, overrated, man. Everybody loves. I do not like sweet potatoes. Everybody loves the sweet potato casserole. They like the stuffing. They like the mashed potatoes. Everybody likes the pie that comes with Thanksgiving. But, most people are just starting to say, man, the whole turkey thing, I don't know about that. That's overrated.
I'm more of a ham guy myself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, listen, I promise we're not going to spend too much time talking about a Thanksgiving dinner because we have so much to get to. Plus, we do have pizza coming out. You're 100% right. But, typically we try and aim for these podcasts initially, like going to the two shows a week format, 30 to 45 minutes.
Right.
And with so much stuff going on, it's been harder and harder to get it under 60. But I promise you, we've got a lot to get to today. And in the words of Malcolm Stewart, just go. Let's just see what happens today. Just let it fly. So let's jump right in. We're going to talk about Virginia Tech and men's basketball first. Then we'll spend the majority of the podcast, of course, previewing UVA and Virginia Tech. If you're watching on Facebook Live, be sure to drop your question now. Malcolm will take them down. We'll get to them at the end of the podcast. So
I'm just laughing. Somebody out there is going, will Virginia Tech go to the NCAA tournament this year? Right now.
Well, I will ask that question for those that are going. I'm going to ask you, but I'm not going to lead off with it. So, of course, we talked about this on Sunday. We had our special Tech Sideline podcast on Sunday, and I asked you guys what would be successful for Virginia Tech basketball in Maui. And you guys basically said 1 win. Don't come away with 3 losses.
Right.
Yeah, and it kind of depends on who the win was against. I was expecting 1 and 2 with a win over Chaminade.
Right.
Honestly, that was my expectations going into the tournament. Whether Tech wins or loses tonight, let's say they do lose to BYU. Yeah, they're 1 and 2, but that 1 win against Michigan State, that makes everybody feel a lot better than, we flew all the way to Maui and we came away with a win against a Division II team.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right?
So, listen, Virginia Tech, big underdogs against Tom Izzo and Michigan State, a team that was the preseason #1 team in the country. Many believe they have maybe the best guard in America in Cassius Winston. And Virginia Tech, Mike Young and company, they go in and they stun Michigan State in the first round of the Maui Invitational. Will, I'll start with you. What is the bigger story, though? Because there's one side of that, Michigan State. The other story is Hokies lose big to Dayton on Tuesday. What's the bigger story for you, the win over Michigan State or the first loss of the season against Dayton?
I'm not going to answer directly. I'm going to say that the two stories go together.
Okay.
Because I did not think, and Chris agrees with me, I didn't think Michigan State played very well at all.
Oh, they were very dysfunctional. They didn't play particularly hard. They were not aggressive defensively. I'm assuming Tom Izzo gave them a good scouting report, and they just didn't listen to it. Right. That was a terrible, terrible game by Michigan State. Now that being said, it's not like it was some kind of fluke. Like Virginia Tech executed their end of the bargain.
That's right.
It's not like they went out there and hit 23s. That they did what they normally do. They hit a high percentage of their 3-pointers, came up with loose balls, didn't turn the basketball over.
Yeah.
So you got to give Virginia Tech credit, but you can also acknowledge that nobody's ever going to call Tom Izzo Mr. November, right?
Yeah.
He's Mr. March. That's when his teams peak. They're generally speaking not nearly as good right now as they are in most Marches.
And then so let's see if there's anything else we want to say about that. You're going to see some Virginia Tech wins in the ACC that look very similar to what you saw against Michigan State.
And this is not a Virginia Tech Michigan State thing. Look around college basketball every year. Stephen F. Austin wins in Cameron Indoor Stadium last night.
First non-conference home loss for Duke since 2000.
Sure, absolutely. Richmond beats Wisconsin.
Yep.
Radford beats Northwestern.
Evansville beats Kentucky.
Right. And Evansville, after that, lost to SMU, East Carolina. Morgan State took them to overtime. All right.
So we were talking about this yesterday, and I was like, Chris, you had me at East Carolina. If you're losing to East Carolina in basketball,
we're not saying that Virginia Tech is Radford or Richmond, although I heard Richmond hammered Tech in a preseason scrimmage. But anyway,
that's probably just a practice.
Yeah. We're not saying that Virginia Tech is any of those teams, but we're saying that a lot changes between November and March. Yeah. We've seen Virginia Tech lose to Alabama State before. We've seen Virginia Tech lose by 30 at home to West Virginia, and then a week later upset the number 5 team in the country.
Yeah.
So basketball's a long season, and there's a lot of peaks and valleys to it.
And that was a peak.
Now, I want to ask this.
I thought it was absolutely ridiculous that CBS came out the day after that game and ranked Tech number 11 in the country. Yeah. That's just not smart. I mean, do those guys know anything? I mean,
I don't know.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, well, let me ask you this though, because you guys were saying that Michigan State didn't play well. I mean, But you look at this. Cassius Winston, I mentioned, one of the top guards in the country. 4 fouls as a guard, only scored 7 points.
Right.
And the Hokies made 10 threes. So let me ask you this. Even though Michigan State didn't play well, how much credit does Coach Young and Virginia Tech deserve
a lot.
for going in and knocking off the number 3 team in the country?
Well, the first thing you have to do is believe you can win. You know, and they certainly went in there with that belief. They took it to Michigan State from the very beginning, and even when Michigan State went on that run in the second half, Tech withstood it and stayed in the game mentally, which is very impressive against a well-coached veteran team like Michigan State. So they deserve a lot of credit, and it goes both ways. Nobody's trying to take credit away from Virginia Tech here. We're just trying to say that. Right, don't expect them to win 24 games because they happen to beat Michigan State, right?
Yep.
So that's all we're saying here.
So to finish my thought, the other side of that coin is what Dayton did to the Hokies last night. Jay Billis was ragging on Michigan State the entire game for guarding the penetrators, leaving the 3-point shooters open down in the corner. You know, and Billis, I think he stopped short of asking the question, "Did you read the scouting report?"
Yeah.
Dayton clearly read the scouting report, and they played tough, physical, man-to-man defense. They made Virginia Tech work for everything. They had the best player on the floor, one of the best players in college basketball. And, you know, in the same way that not every game is going to go like the Michigan State game went, and not every game is going to go like that one against Dayton went. And I thought you saw Tech's youth late in that game against Dayton when they just – you know, they got down close to 20 and just ran out of gas. I spent the last 8 to 10 minutes of the game just checking my watch going, man, when's this thing going to be over?
Because there were a lot of fouls in the second half.
And it just –
Yeah. And we saw, actually, towards the end of the first half, it was a close game in the first half. Tech got punched in the mouth towards the end of the first half on that 17-3 run. And they didn't recover until after halftime. And they actually played pretty well for the first 10, 12 minutes of the second half. They played even, actually cut into the lead a little bit.
They did.
But when Dayton started punching them in the mouth again, they didn't respond, and they just pretty much checked out mentally. And that's not uncommon for young teams when they're playing a bigger, more physical, more experienced team like that, and they're starting to get punched in the mouth, and they know they're going to lose. You check out mentally, and that's common for young teams. We saw our football team do it against Duke this year.
Yep.
So it happens, and that's not going to be the last time this year that it happens.
Somebody on the message board had a really good comment. They said, it's so nice to not get super upset by a blowout, because there's going to be some of that going on.
Somebody said it in the comments to my article yesterday before the Dayton loss. He said, I feel like we're playing with house money this year. And I agree with that. Like, you beat Michigan State, that's a big deal. But at this point, it doesn't matter that you lose to Dayton. Dayton's better than Tech. Dayton would win that game 80 to 90% of the time. They're just better. Michigan State isn't as good at this point in the season as Dayton is. They're just not as functional. They'll be better in March, most likely, because that's just how Izzo teams roll. But it shouldn't take any, like, losing to Dayton as badly as Tech did last night shouldn't take anything away from what they've done so far.
Right.
I think they're ahead of what everybody expected at this point. Dayton is better than a number of ACC teams that Virginia Tech will play, including the one that they've already played.
In Clemson.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Will, if the Hokies come away, again, for those that are listening, if you're listening on Thanksgiving or Friday, they play BYU Wednesday night at 11:30, as we've said, for the final game in Maui. They win that, they go 2-1 on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best. How would you rate Tech in Maui?
Oh, that's like an 8 or a 9.
Yeah.
A 10.
Assuming a 10 is winning Maui.
Assuming a 10 is winning it, yeah. Now, BYU is going to be tough. I haven't studied them, but you know how BYU is. They have a bunch of 22 to 24-year-olds playing for them, And
they're 4-3.
Okay.
They've. It's like, I'm sure they're good, but they have struggled at times so far.
All right, good.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it goes.
I don't know what to expect.
Before we wrap up with basketball, because we've got a lot of football talk to get to, I want to ask about 3 players. We'll go ahead and start with Landers Nollie. And I think so many people were so curious. We'd been talking about how would the redshirt season affect him early on, and would he be able to dive right in? Okay, he played well against Clemson. Of course, he answered that question, then he kept it going. And then that big 3 he had against Michigan State. I mean, is this something that we should be expecting game in and game out as Nollie to drop at least 20 points a game?
I wouldn't say that. I think eventually, as more and more film gets out and he's presented with more and more matchup problems as he plays Dukes and UVAs and UNCs and guys with athletes who can actually hang with him.
Right.
You don't expect that to happen every night. And like every young player, he's got to learn the difference between a good shot and a great shot, and when you pass up a good shot to hold out for a great shot. Mike Young last night just told his guys, let her rip, right? You heard him say that in the pregame. And he's absolutely right to do that right now. I don't think you can't automatically teach a young player what a good shot is, what a great shot is, when to pass up the good shot to try to get the great shot. I think that's learned over time. You don't try to overteach them with that right now. So Landers Nollie, Jalen Cone, Naheem Aline, Hunter Couture, all those guys, they're still learning that, and that's something that will gradually improve. And you look at last year's Virginia Tech basketball team, how much better they were offensively with a senior Justin Robinson, a sophomore Nikhil, Med being a
senior,
Kerry Blackshear being a redshirt junior. They were good the 2 years previous, but once they all became upperclassmen or seniors in two of them's cases, they just got so much better at it. And this group will do the same. It's going to be an ongoing process. They're going to gradually get better at it. But when they're seniors, they're going to be really, really good at it. But it's something that, it's teachable, but it's also something you have to learn from experience over time. It's not going to be like, oh, one night you learn how to do it and you're perfect for the rest of your career. So I thought there are times where, and this I'm specifically talking about Nollie, he's really, really, really good. He doesn't know at times when to force a shot and when not to. Like, there are times he's doing it a little earlier in the shot clock than he should be, in my opinion. Now, sometimes they go in, and maybe that's because he's really, really good, or maybe there's a little bit of luck factor so far, and that's going to come back down to earth as he progresses through his career. But, that's for him to figure out, and Mike Young to sit down with him and talk to him about the ins and outs of things. I do think he forces things a little bit, but as guys step up around him and maybe a second consistent scoring option emerges, maybe he'll be less likely to do that. I think Hunter Couture has been really good recently. Everybody was all over him after the Clemson game because he didn't make a shot. I'm like, dude just played the first game of his college career. You ready to run him out of town?
Yeah.
My goodness. I mean, the guy's a good basketball player. He gets on the floor. He's got a high basketball IQ, and he can shoot. I think Naheem Aline is going to be a really good scorer for Virginia Tech. He's a guy that can actually take guys off the dribble and finish around the basket. He's not finishing quite at the clip that you would want with his mid-range stuff and even around the basket, but as he gets a little bigger and a little stronger and adjusts to the speed of the game and things like that, he'll start finishing more and more of those and become a really good player for Tech. So I think Nollie will be better. Maybe his scoring average won't quite be better, but he'll be a better basketball player when guys get better around him, I think.
Damn.
That was a long-winded answer.
That's a great. Here's what, real quick, because I think it is worth mentioning this. Two guys that have seemed just to really step up, and Coach Young has been really high on, Beatty and PJ Horn. Mm-hmm. How have you seen, especially Horn, transition into a guy who can make shots on
Horn
the perimeter?
Made one 3-pointer last year, right?
Yeah.
You know, and somebody was joking on our message board. I don't remember exactly how they put it, but it was like, oh, PJ Horn's been freed now that Buzz is out of town.
He was the only guy that didn't have the green light under Buzz.
Yeah, and wow.
And they've said that he worked so hard this summer on his 3-point shot, really put an emphasis on it.
So let's talk about PJ Horn. When he was in high school, he was recruited to Virginia Tech as an undersized power forward, 6'5", right?
Right.
So Obi Toppin, when he was coming out of high school, was 6'5". And then he went to prep school and grew 4 inches that year in prep school. So imagine if PJ Horn had grown 3 inches after he got to Virginia Tech.
He'd be Obi Toppin.
He'd be. I mean, it's like one of those things that's like, okay, sometimes you just get lucky.
Well, that's the David Robinson story. He came out of high school something like 6'4" or 6'5", and by the
it's
time
the Steph Curry story.
By the time he was done at Navy, he was David Robinson.
Right.
Right.
And same with Steph
Curry.
Curry.
So PJ's a really skilled player. I wish we could play him as an undersized power forward as opposed to an undersized center.
Yeah.
He's going to have nights where I think he's really good, and honestly, he's going to have some nights where he disappears because he's just if he's playing a bigger guy who's not as athletic as him, but there are times where he's going to play a bigger guy who's just as athletic as him in the ACC, and those are the nights where he's going to disappear. Like I don't think look at him Dayton had some athletic big men, Toppin obviously.
Yeah.
But how many rebounds did he have last night? I think at halftime he only had 1. I don't know about the second half. So
Horn?
Yeah.
He had 4 rebounds.
4 rebounds. So you can control how.
I'm sorry, 7. Excuse me.
Oh, did he end up with
4?
7?
He had 4 offensive rebounds and.
Sure you're looking at the right box score?
Sorry.
You're looking at
I'm sorry. I had Michigan State up. He had 7 boards against Michigan State, and yesterday he had 3.
3.
Right.
Okay. So you can control how hard you play. Right? So if you give absolute 100% of your ability as a 6'5" center, what if the other center is 6'10", is just as athletic as you, and also gives 100% of his ability? Right? You're going to lose. Yeah. You can't give more than 100%, right? People say give 110%, but no, you can't give more than 100%. It is what it is. What if you and that other guy try the exact same level, and he's just bigger than you? And so Tech is going to play as hard as they can this year. I know that, but there are going to be nights where they face teams that play just as hard, but they're bigger, and there'll be nights, and those are going to be the nights where Horn's going to struggle.
Yeah.
Hokies and BYU 11:30 tip in Maui to close off the Maui Invitational for Virginia Tech. Their next home game, the Duke Blue Devils,
which is sold out, by the way.
Also, BYU, worth noting right now, so they beat Cal State Fullerton, lost to San Diego State, beat Southern Utah by 5, beat Houston by 1, lost to Boise by 4, and lost 78-63 to UCLA. Oh, no, they beat UCLA 78-63, their best one of the year. Lost to Kansas 71-56. So
that is all over the map. So we'll see what happens tonight.
We'll see.
I mean, it's November in basketball.
Yeah.
Anything can happen.
Yeah.
All right, well, that'll do it for our conversation on Hokies basketball. We've got some football to talk about. We've got a Coastal Championship on the line, a berth in the ACC title game on the line, and an Orange Bowl berth on the line when we come back from this timeout. Tech Sideline Podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm.
Tight end to the right side of the line. Perkins takes the snap. Pressured. He is hit. And the ball is loose. And it is recovered by the Hokies. The cup is going nowhere, Mikey. They did it somehow. And the Hokies survive another scare from the Cavaliers. What a win in overtime. And it's 15 in a row.
Welcome back to the Tech Sideline Podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm. So glad that everybody could join us, whether you're watching live or archived or listening, however, wherever you're getting the Tech Sideline Podcast. So glad you could join us. Malcolm Stewart, Will Stewart, Chris Coleman, Evan Hughes. We wrap up talk on Virginia Tech men's basketball. We transition to the game, the Commonwealth Cup, Virginia and Virginia Tech. Guys, this one has probably the most at stake for both sides since at least 2011. It's the third time that Virginia Tech and UVA are meeting with the Coastal on the line. Yeah. And again, it's been since 2011, the last time that it happened. Yes. We're here in a conversation. Yes. Domino's. Great selection, by the way.
Good selection.
They have a good app.
Do they?
I mean, they don't pay us for sponsorship, but their app is pretty good.
Will, I'll let you get the first word. When you I don't want to ask I want to ask a broad question here, because when you're thinking about this game right now, whether it's UVA, whether it's the streak, whether it's Tech and what they need to do, when you're thinking about this game, what's at the top of mind right now?
Wow. The fact that, to be honest, I don't want to use the word bored, but there was about a 5-year stretch there where all right, man.
Thank you, Sir Malcolm.
Ooh, that is hot. Where I was it was getting difficult to find things to say about the game, particularly once once Tech started to struggle around 2012, 2013, 2014, and UVA was struggling under Mike London. It just I'm struggling to find the words, but it lost something for me. I just wasn't that interested in it anymore. This game is really interesting, and it's not just because of the streak. Every article I wrote about this game for the last 5 years has been about the streak. That's all there is to write about, And now there's just a lot more going on, and I'm not just talking about the Coastal Championship. I'm talking about I find myself looking at Virginia Tech and how their season has turned around. And one of the things we're talking about is, and Chris wrote this in an article, and I echoed it in my Monday thoughts. When you think about this game, Virginia Tech's had such a nice turnaround this season that actually going out and losing to UVA would kind of ruin all that, you know? Everybody wants Virginia Tech to finish this time, just like you finished in 2010, just like you finished in 1995. You lose those first 2 games or 2 of the first 4. 2004, they lost 2 out of the first 4. So that's kind of, to me, it's not just about this game or the streak or even about the Coastal title. It's about how are you going to remember this season? And I think we all want to remember it as an amazing turnaround that ends with a trip, to the ACC championship game, where you either have an incredible once in every 10 years win and you win the ACC, or you lose the ACC and you get to go to the Orange Bowl. When we were talking,
the Orange Bowl either way, right?
I was about to say, win or lose, you're going to the Orange Bowl, correct?
Well, how about that?
Yeah.
So you're right. It's for the Orange.
This game is for the Orange Bowl.
It's just so much bigger than the daggone streak or having to monitor message boards if Tech loses or whatever. Now, the other thing I think is that, and we're going to break this thing down, and Virginia Tech should win this football game, just like they should have won that game against Pitt last weekend, and they did. Virginia Tech should win this football game. That doesn't mean they're going to, Sure. I tell people all the time, man, at some point, things are going to break Virginia's way. There's so much that hasn't broken their way. And a lot of that, and almost none of that is luck. Most of it is either bad coaching decisions on UVA's part or just Virginia Tech making plays.
Most years Tech has better players, let's be honest.
Yeah, and last year that wasn't really the case.
UVA was a better team last year and Tech won it.
Yeah. So one of these days that streak's going to come to an end, and I just really don't want it to be this year. Last year, I don't know.
Well, that would have ended
the bowl streak also
and the UVA streak at the same time.
But it would have been understandable last year because just Tech wasn't a very good team, and they weren't better than UVA
this year.
Tech
should win,
right.
And there's a lot more on the line.
Right. And like he said, you want to have good memories about this team because it's such an incredible story. Their turnaround, it's been fantastic. But I think your average fan would remember them as a team that the first team to lose to UVA in almost 2 decades.
Yeah. And
forget about all the good they accomplished in October and November before the UVA game. And this goes back to basketball as well. I like where the fan happiness is right now. Beating Michigan State, having a really good year, and
trolling people's final scores on
exactly.
Twitter.
That's exactly. And it's a happy fan base, and it wasn't a happy fan base a few months ago. From the transfer portal stuff at the end of last season, to Buzz Williams leaving, to the first month of football season, our fans were in a bad mood, and it put me in a bad mood because we have to read about it all day on message boards and things like that, and I got tired of talking about it. It was really
everywhere you went in that first month of the football season, everybody wanted to talk about how bad Virginia Tech was.
And it gets annoying.
It's very fatiguing.
It's very fatiguing, and the fan base is happy right now, man. And I want them to keep being happy because it makes me happy.
Okay, there we go. Fan base, guys, everyone needs you to stay happy. Okay, there you hear it. Red shirt people and stay happy. Chris Coleman. Listen, let's just go ahead and talk about UVA. We'll talk about Tech, but let's talk about this Virginia team that has been the most consistent team in the Coastal from August to November. Is that fair to say?
I would say that's fair, yeah.
And they are led by Bryce Perkins, who is one of the more elusive quarterbacks in the ACC. A quarterback that can get it done through the air and on his feet. But the Hokies have also seen him before in last year, and the majority of the defense comes back from last season to this year. How important and what kind of advantage does it hold that this team went up against him last year? Do you think there's any kind of advantage to that?
I think it's an advantage that they've played 2 or 3 quarterbacks in a row that have escapability in the pocket. Not necessarily that they've faced Perkins before, because he's going to be the best scrambling quarterback
all year.
They faced this year, except for maybe the exception of Newman at Wake Forest. Who really knows? But that's 3 or 4 quarterbacks, even if you count Ian Book, who has some escapability. Guys that can escape the pocket. And those guys used to kill Tech, and they haven't done it recently.
Yeah.
Tech has done a great job against mobile quarterbacks recently. And by recent, I mean at least the last month, maybe more than that. I know the last month. So I feel good about that from that standpoint. But I also recognize that as far as his escapability and his running goes, he's better than those guys. He breaks a lot of tackles. He's really strong. You can't
He makes
tackle
the
him.
exceptional play.
Right,
You know,
Like that 2-point conversion against Florida State.
Yeah.
Do you remember when he just danced all around the field?
Oh, he single-handedly won that game.
Yeah.
Florida State's defense. Florida State outplayed UVA most of that game, but he was running around so much that you could just look at their defense and tell they were gassed in the fourth quarter.
And the running ability of Ian Book and Kenny Pickett was really annoying, but Bryce Perkins can do what they do and then do the extra thing, you know. And that's one of the things that's got me worried about this game, you know. I don't know about his motivation. People are like, how bad do you think he wants to win this game after fumbling that snap last year? As we talk about time after time after time, that stuff matters for the first couple of minutes of the game.
So you bring it up, Will, and I think it's worth asking both of you right now. If you're a Tech fan, what is worrying you about this game? Because if you look at shutting out teams the last 9 quarters in a row.
I got that one.
Because Virginia Tech-wise, they're playing well. There should be no reason to panic about the Hokies right now, correct?
What worries you is what Pitt fans went through last weekend. Give up the big play, give up the touchdown, then fumble and give up another touchdown. Boom, boom, you're down 14. That's the kind of thing that worries me. Playing a game that isn't determined by big plays or turnovers doesn't worry me. Virginia Tech should win that game.
For sure.
So that's and we'll run through some stats for you. And I've got them on a printout here. Bryce Perkins is not good at throwing the ball down the field. What if he just chucks one up and they get a 70-yard touchdown pass? You know, these are things that are not supposed to happen that throw off the natural order of how the game is supposed to go.
It's like, what if somebody hits a half-court shot?
That kind of thing.
How about you, Chris? What worries you the most about this game?
Well, from an X's and O's standpoint, their front against Tech's front, they're a 3-4 defense, but they hit you with a lot of different looking fronts. They bring a lot of exotic blitzes. Tech starts 2 sophomores and 3 freshmen on the offensive line, and those freshmen are going to see some things on Friday that they've never seen before. So that's a concern. But at the same time, they're so aggressive and they blitz so much. Virginia Tech's offense is based on misdirection. I see Virginia Tech being in a lot of 3rd and longs in this game, but I also see them hitting some big plays when their misdirection catches UVA in the wrong blitz. But in general, their front against Tech's young offensive line is concerned from an X's and O standpoint. That's the only thing that really concerns me from an X's and O standpoint. You know, even with Perkins break some runs, I don't think they're going to be able to be consistent in the passing game against Tech. But throw out X's and O's. The only thing that concerns me is the law of averages. I mean, they got to win at some point, right? Yeah, you just have to.
Year after year, the law of averages.
I mean, seriously, it adds up. I mean, they have to beat Tech at some point. What do you go the next 100 years? Tech winning the game? That's not going to happen, right? It's got to happen at some point.
And to me, too, I was thinking about this, and I don't know the answer to this question per se, but to me, it does feel like if UVA is going to do it, it was either last year or this year, because to me, this is a senior-led team offensively and defensively. They lose a lot after
I
this
don't
year.
know. They've got. I think I looked at their roster card, and they got about 7 seniors starting total.
Well, you know, Perkins is the big one. You don't know how he'll be replaced. We don't know how good Armstrong is. I believe he's their backup. Watch out for him. Some trick situations, by the way. You know, he'll line up in punt protection and throw passes and things like that. Right. The backup quarterback. I don't know that UVA is as good right now as they were this time last season.
I think that's fair. Or earlier this year.
Certainly. I think their offense has been coming on the last few weeks, but their defense has really dropped off with some key injuries in the secondary. But I think I might be wrong on this, and some people might disagree, but I think their team last year at this time was slightly better than the one right now. They were certainly better than Virginia Tech last year, and Tech won the game still. Tech, I believe, is better than UVA this year. I think UVA is good in 2 of the 3 phases of the game. I think they're below average offensively, and I think Tech is good in all 3 phases. So therefore, Tech should win the game. But the team that should win doesn't always win, especially when this law of average thing keeps building up, man.
Right.
I do want to run through, for those that don't really realize, the schedule they played this year. So they're 8-3, 5-2 in the conference. Open up the year at Pittsburgh, 30-14 win. Win against William & Mary, beat Florida State at home 31-24, knocked off Old Dominion, and then they were in the top 20. They went to South Bend. They lost at number 10 Notre Dame 35-20. At Miami, 17-9 loss on a Friday night was not a good loss. I'm sorry, it was kind of like one of those ugly games against the Hurricanes. They did smack Duke 48-14.
They always smack Duke.
Lost at Louisville 28-21, beat North Carolina on the road 38-31. Edge Georgia Tech 33-28, bye week, Liberty 55-27 win, and now Virginia Tech. So
the Georgia Tech game really is what stands out to me.
I think that's the outlier and all that.
Georgia Tech, like their secondary, or UVA's secondary, has piled up some injuries. And Georgia Tech, they actually made Georgia Tech, James Graham, look like a really good quarterback. He went 15 of 22 for 229 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game against UVA's secondary. I forget the kid's name. We don't know that he's going to be starting. But one of their defensive backs, Heskin Smith, he's a small corner, 5'11", 175. Liberty targeted him 17 times. Didn't target anybody else more than 7 times. They targeted him 17 times, completed 10 of them for 223 yards and 2 touchdowns. He is one of the biggest liabilities in the secondary on Virginia Tech's schedule this year. We don't know whether he'll play this week because we don't know the health status of some of their other players. But if he's out there, he just makes their defense so much worse, quite frankly. So I don't think their defense is as good as it was earlier this year. I think their offense is better right now than it was earlier this year because I think I watched that ODU game and
ODU hung in there, right?
Oh, ODU's defense just completely annihilated UVA's offensive line. Their offensive tackles are bad. Their interior is decent. But Tech has a major strength at defensive tackle and middle linebacker too. So I think that even if they cancel each other out, UVA's offensive tackles aren't good, particularly the left tackle.
So let's do this. I want to focus a little bit about the offense, the defense. We've kind of been circling around. I want to kind of take a deeper dive in, read some stats. Will, I want to ask you this about Virginia's offense. Perkins gets all of the attention, and the stats show that as well. Not only is he, of course, their leading passer, obviously, but he is their leading rusher with 523 yards.
Well, read the number of attempts.
177 attempts, and then their closest running back, 97 rushes.
Now,
so that's a wide margin.
Of those 177, about, I think, 34 of those are sacks.
They're 115th in the country in sacks allowed.
Yeah, so he's now, as many sacks as they've given up, they've actually sacked opposing quarterbacks more. Pitt was number 1 in the country in sacks, and I think UVA is 8 or 9. I looked it up this morning.
Yeah.
So, but back to the topic. So he's got what I would call 140 or 145 true rushing attempts, whether they're scrambles or designed runs or whatever. Yeah, and the next the guy with the next most carries is the running back with 97. You say
97.
So what's the question? I'll answer it.
Just when you look at Virginia's running game and how Perkins is their leading rusher, they're pretty one-dimensional according to the stats, correct?
They are until they get inside the 10-yard line, and then they hand it off to, what's the pronunciation?
I have no idea.
Talapapa? Is that how you pronounce it? He's got something like, let's see, he's got 11 touchdowns, and I think the stat is that 9 or 10 of them have come from inside the 10-yard line. And I remember watching them play earlier this year and thinking, I like him in the red zone. He's not a huge guy, but I think he's a physical guy for his size. So it looks as if they get, again, without having watched them a lot and just looking at the stats, it looks like Perkins gets them into the red zone, and Talapapa gets them in on the ground, and Perkins has a number of rushing touchdowns also. He's got 9. And then the other thing they do down close is I think they go to Joe Reed. Joe Reed's average depth of target. It's funny because when we put together the roster card, the receivers are sorted on number of yards. So Reed is actually UVA's third leading receiver in number of yards, leading receiver in number of catches. He's got 6 touchdowns, so his average depth of target is only about 8.5 yards or something like that. But he's got 6 touchdowns. He's the guy who scores the touchdowns for him. They've got somebody else with 3 and another guy with 1. So that's kind of a look at. Somebody on our message board phrased it very well. They said that they use their defense to try to force turnovers, that they're just very active pressuring your quarterback, and they're trying to force turnovers and get you in a short field, and then Perkins will get you down into the red zone, and then they got 2 or 3 guys that can get you in from there.
So here's a question I have for you guys. One thing I like to do, especially about the quarterbacks, is kind of rank them in terms of what VT has seen this year. Mm-hmm. I'll ask you this. Virginia's offense, where does this rank? And if they're not number 1 or so, give me like top 5, top 7. Where does this offense rank in terms of toughest offenses that Tech's defense will see this season?
To be honest, Tech hasn't faced all that many tough offenses this year.
No, I'm going through it in my mind.
Miami's sometimes is good, sometimes it's not. Pitt's was terrible. Georgia Tech's was terrible. Notre Dame can't run the ball, so theirs wasn't very
but their
good.
receivers,
Their
they're tight end
good.
and the receiver.
Yeah.
Rhode Island's receivers.
Yeah,
I love bringing those guys
they
up.
were good.
BC's offense is actually pretty good.
AJ Dillon.
They were at that point in time. And
UNC's was the best.
Wake Forest, we didn't see the best of Wake Forest because they were missing 1 wide receiver and then another one got knocked out. So we didn't see the best of them.
So is this top 3, would you say?
If it is, that doesn't say much about Tech's
offense. Is that damning with faint praise?
Yeah, because I think Perkins is good. I also don't think he's not a natural passer. You know, he's bottom half in the ACC and big time. No, he's last place in the ACC in big time throws. Mm-hmm. He's last place in the ACC in accuracy rate, 20 yards or more downfield. I just don't think he's a natural in the passing game. I think losing Zacchaeus really hurt their offense a lot. Yeah. And if you want to talk about Joe Reed, last year he averaged over 18 yards a catch.
Wow.
All right, against Virginia Tech, he had 4 catches for 119 yards and 2 touchdowns. Mm. He can beat guys deep, but they're using him as a little outlet guy this year, and he might be one of the most poorly utilized players in the country, in my opinion. Mm. But so I think Tech's corners are so good that they can negate UVA's receivers, who are pretty solid.
Oh, by the way, UVA's receivers have phenomenal hands.
They're very good hands. They don't drop passes like Pitt's receivers.
Let me find that stat while you guys keep talking.
It was something like 2 drops and
244 targets.
Yeah,
that is insane.
Yeah, that's pretty insane.
Yeah.
So they're not going to drop passes against Tech most likely, like Pitt did. But I also think, that Tech's corners are really, really good, and Perkins. I don't know. If you take away the short throws like Tech did against Pitt, they're going to have trouble completing passes down the field. It's just what it seems like. It seems like outside of the difference in the receiver's ability to catch, if you stop their short passing game, they're not going to be able to throw the ball on you. And I don't think their running game is one of the worst in the country.
Yeah, are they like 118 in running?
Something like that.
In yards per game or something like that?
They're not good at it. So
and they don't generate any more of a tailback running game than Virginia Tech does.
Right.
The yards per carry are very similar.
So I don't know where I'd rank them. I mean, maybe they're middle of the pack, but that's simply because Tech just hasn't faced that very many good offenses. Sure. I just don't think they stress you all that much. And if Perkins is on, then I think he's certainly played better in the last month, but he also hasn't played a good defense in the last month.
Last thing I'll say about the offense, I was looking at their offensive line. No red shirts.
Really?
And actually, you
know what? They only list red shirt if they're a red shirt freshman. They're one of those schools that they drop the R once you get beyond being a redshirt freshman.
I was about to say, because on defense and offense they have no redshirt starters, and I was about to.
But I'd disapprove if that was the case.
Their O-line: left tackle sophomore, left guard sophomore, center sophomore, right guard junior, right tackle junior. So that's compared to what Tech has seen offensive lines here over the last couple weeks. That's actually fairly young. Any other points you want to make about the offense before we look at the defense and then get to questions? Anything else that jumps out at you?
All right, let me find. We've got a couple of guys on our subscriber board who do advanced numbers type things, and they drop it every week, and it's just great stuff. One of them is AIS Hokie 05, and the other one is Kamikaze 21 or something like that. He spells it funny. I was finally looking at it the other day, and I was like, oh, that's pronounced Kamikaze. So let's see let me find out which one of those guys was talking about. Talking about Bobby Haskins at left tackle. Bruley called him a turnstile and said there's some bad left tackle play in the ACC, and he's up there with the worst of them. 34 QB pressures allowed on the year are the most of any left tackle in the conference. Their QB pressure rate of 32.6% is better than only Georgia Tech. So that, you can get pressure on Perkins. And, of course, then he can burn you by getting away from it. So let's see. I think we've covered everything. Yeah, we talked about so here is the stat on Perkins throwing downfield. On targets of 20-plus yards downfield, Perkins is the lowest graded quarterback in the ACC, and his accuracy rate is just 20.9%, worst in the league.
Right.
Wow.
Well, you remember that deep ball they had running wide open behind Tech's defense last year?
Yep.
Yeah, the receiver dropped it,
underthrew
but he underthrew it like crazy. Yeah.
So Chris was talking earlier, one more thing, and then we'll wrap up this part of it. Chris was talking earlier about big-time throws, BTT, and that's a Pro Football Focus statistic. And they evaluate throws regardless of whether or not they're completed. Just did the quarterback make a good throw? And a big-time throw is, wow, that's the kind of throw an NFL quarterback would make. And it says that Bryce Perkins has a rate of 1.6% big-time throws. So, interesting stuff.
Which is lowest in the ACC.
Yeah,
right?
Lowest among ACC QBs. I would think it's one of the lowest in the country. But so we're going to sit here and hash all these numbers and talk about all these things and all these matchups and everything. And the conclusion is that Tech should win this football game.
Yeah.
So it gets back to earlier in the conversation about, what are you worried about? The things that throw the game off.
And we'll get to your predictions here in a minute, which I know where it's going, but I'm going to throw a wrinkle in there too. Quickly want to look at this defense because they only have three senior starters. That is at 2 on the defensive line. That's Richard Burney at left side defensive end, Eli Handback, right side defensive end, and then their middle linebacker, Jordan Mack. But also their entire secondary, all juniors. So all upperclassmen, so still some experience there. UVA's played in a couple of low-scoring games, like the Miami game, looked sharp at times against Liberty. So what do you make of this Virginia defense? What challenges will they give Hendon Hooker and the Hokies offense?
Well, the number of different fronts they line up in will create problems for Tech's offensive line, particularly with a true freshman center. You got 3 freshmen started right next to each other, and they'll see looks they haven't seen before. They blitz more than just about anybody. A lot of exotic blitzes that the Tech offensive line hasn't seen before. I think their pressure rate is 3rd highest in the country.
4th highest.
4th highest.
Yep.
So they really want to get there and get offenses behind the chains, force turnovers, things like that. Hooker hasn't been blitzed yet like he'll be blitzed this weekend. The thing about Pitt is they blitz, but they actually have their blitz rate is like right at ACC average. They can get pressure with their front 4. UVA blitzes a lot. That's how they get their pressure. So, yeah, I think Tech is going to get knocked back into some long yardage situations, but the Hokies are so adept at those screens and misdirection passes that I think they're going to hit some big plays too. So that's going to be a real interesting matchup from an X's and O's standpoint. Tech's offense versus UVA's defense. I think that's the most interesting part of the game.
And they bring it from everywhere. They have 7 guys that basically they get involved in pressuring the quarterback. I would imagine that's the entire front 7, and probably not just doesn't include the defensive backs. Chris talked about maybe worrying about Brian Hudson at center. UVA's got a defensive tackle whose win rate, and again, I'm borrowing these stats from these posts on the message board, which is great stuff. This defensive tackle's win rate, Aaron Falmui, I think that's how
he's listed as a backup left end.
Yep. Yeah, he's actually not listed as an end. Okay.
Right. Because I think he started for him at nose guard last year, though, if I remember right. But I don't really remember. But he plays a lot either way.
But he's got one of the highest win rates in the country. In other words, he beats the guy in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about the defense. Now I kind of want to incorporate Virginia Tech into the picture now. So, Hokies offense, what does Hendon Hooker, this offense, need to do? It might just be as simple as you guys might just answer say, keep doing what they've been doing.
But is there anything that's actually my first instinct? Just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Is there anything that won't work against UVA that they've been doing? Anything that causes concern defensively?
I think it'll be tough for them to run up the middle. But then again, I think UVA is going to really stress not giving up outside runs. I think that's their thing. So maybe the Tech will find some room up the middle. But we've seen Tech add something to their misdirection game every week. Like they were killing Georgia Tech with one thing, and then they threw it back to Tavion Robinson the next week against Pitt, which they worked that off of what they did the previous week against Georgia Tech. So what do they add this week? What wrinkle do they add against UVA? How does Brad Cornelsen keep moving the target, like you to say, like you say? And I don't know. If I knew that, I'd be coaching.
That's right.
Yeah. But I do think that's going to be the most interesting matchup of the game. Okay. It's just Virginia Tech's offense, their ability to generate big plays through misdirection, and a UVA defense, which, because they blitz so much, is probably susceptible to some misdirection.
Well, I'll ask you this question now, flipping the other side, going back to Tech's defense against UVA's offense. Can the Hokies blitz as much as they have been the last couple of weeks against Bryce Perkins and the Cavaliers?
I think that, based on the fact that Perkins is, now don't get me wrong, he does have some good numbers in the passing game, but he's not going to knock your socks off as a passer. So I think you can, and Tech's corners are playing so well that I think you can play a lot of man coverage, and that does free you up to blitz if you want to. So it's what approach do you want to be? Do you want to pressure the heck out of Perkins and try to get him to make some mistakes, or do you want to just play your lanes and keep him in the pocket and cover the receivers? And that's up to Bud to figure out. That's why Bud gets paid the big bucks. Although I like Dax Hollifield and Rayshard Ashby, I don't think either one of them is particularly good at a change of direction type tackle. Chamari Connor's pretty good at that. We know Tisdale's good at it, Alan Tisdale, but...
actually, his missed tackle rate is getting really high. Remember Book juked him in the open field against Notre Dame, and after that, teams have been going right after him?
Interesting. Yeah. That I don't recall.
I did not recall it.
So he looked great against Georgia Tech, but against other teams,
but that was a straight
so
line closing speed tackle.
Correct. Yeah. That guy didn't try to juke him.
So,
that's a great point.
I don't know, man.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about the Hokies, and now, of course, it is time for predictions, which... It sounds like we know the direction you're going in, but let me just ask this question before I ask you score and who's going to win. Is there a chance that Virginia Tech easily beats Virginia?
Yeah. Yep. If
easily being maybe 10 or 13 plus.
I think so.
Oh yeah.
It could go like the Pittsburgh game went. You get those two early scores, it throws things out of whack. You get back to the offensive game. You get back to the offensive game plan for Virginia Tech. It's very similar to the one against Pittsburgh. Don't do anything stupid on third and long. Play the field position game as long as you're keeping them under control with your defense, which I think they will. So I'm getting off track here a little bit. Yeah, if a couple of plays happen that throw things out of whack, it could wind up being a 28-0 type game. Absolutely.
Chris, can you give me a player on offense for Tech, defense for Tech, one of each that you think needs to perform well against UVA and why?
Offense and defense. Defensively, I'm going to look at Connor.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I think the corners are going to do a really good job against those outside receivers. They're going to try to match up Reed against Connor in the slot, and he's got to tackle well against Reed, in my opinion. Offensively, man, you could go in a number of different directions. I'm inclined to think it's going to be one of those outside receivers. It could be any of the receiving options. You never know if it's going to be Keene or Mitchell as the go-to guy at tight end. But if that cornerback plays, and I've already forgotten, if Heskin Smith plays at 5'11", 175, I think Virginia Tech has a tremendous advantage at wide receiver. So
you mean matching up defensively?
Yeah. So pick your Trey Turner, Hazleton, whoever out there, and I think that's the guy who will have to make plays if they're matched up on that particular UVA defensive back because he's very vulnerable.
I think the point about Chamari Connor is a really good one because You saw what Carolina did, getting him isolated in coverage. Pitt couldn't do it. Can UVA do it using Joe Reed? I think that's one of the more important things.
But with his downfield accuracy rate, the worst in the ACC, that UNC quarterback's a real deal.
Yeah, Sam Howell was hitting
Perkins,
him downfield.
Perkins isn't that good of a passer.
Yeah.
So
the concern is he actually does hit one.
Yeah.
All right, so here, final thing before we get to questions. Score, and who will we be talking about on Monday's podcast as the guy for the Hokies if they win?
So another one of our message board subscribers, I mentioned him, Kamikaze. He apparently has his own computer model that he uses to predict games. And one of the things that's been drawing everyone's attention is that Virginia is still, by ESPN's FPI index, Virginia is still given something like a 65% chance to beat Virginia Tech. And that's because ESPN's model's using the entire season, the entire body of work, like the NCAA selection committee.
They're using the Ryan Willis offense as part of the equation.
Yeah, and the
Duke game
and the Duke game for defense.
Yeah.
But Kamikaze fed three different things into his model. And I thought the discussion was interesting. If you throw the whole season in, his model says UVA has something like a 77% chance of winning. And I don't want to create dead air time by looking at my paper, so I'll be vague about it. So then he took the second half of the season, and he called that the Virginia Tech optimal model. He took the second half of Virginia Tech's season and UVA's, I believe, entire season, and that flipped it a little bit and gave Tech a greater chance of winning. And his score prediction came out to a 34-20. Which is going to be my prediction. That's what I'm picking, Virginia Tech 34, UVA 20. Then he took a model where it's Virginia Tech's second half of the season and UVA's last three games. And that one came out something like 40-25 Virginia Tech. So interesting stuff, and I'm comfortable with the 34-20 model. Wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't that high scoring, if it was 24-10 instead of 34-20, but that's my take. I love it. I love what he ran, and I think that makes sense to me, and that's where I'm landing, 34-20 Hokies.
Like I picked it 31-17 in my preview, Virginia Tech. I don't see any numbers outside of ESPN's FPI numbers, which I think we all agree September shouldn't count for Virginia Tech. It's a completely different football team.
Yeah.
I can't see any numbers that would make me favor UVA in this game. Outside of the law of average,
right?
And that always
and something
you.
else I want to get to here in a minute, but go ahead.
Yeah, that's all I got. All the numbers point to Virginia
and a player.
Tech
Who we talking about on Monday if Tech wins? It could be either side.
Probably Hooker.
Okay.
I think it's probably Hooker.
Okay.
The numbers indicate that he's a much, much better quarterback than Bryce Perkins this year.
Yeah. By the way, Hendon Hooker's QB rating's 179, and if he had enough attempts and played enough games, he'd be number 8 in the country.
Yeah.
That tells you how well he's playing. So to get to the law of averages, he's got 10 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. How much longer can you keep going on with the 0 interceptions?
Hopefully to whatever FCS opponent we start off the season with next year.
Yeah.
No, never mind.
I just think that Tech needs to guard against feeling like they've got it all figured out and like this is a foregone conclusion. That feeling in the pit of their stomach when they went up against Georgia Tech, when they went up against Pitt, you got to keep that there. You can't be thinking, hey, 2 shutouts in a row, 103-7, we've outscored the opposition in the last 10 quarters. Man, we'll just roll in there and beat them. I don't want to insult the players or coaches, because once those two teams get on the field and they start doing the inevitable pregame jawing and stuff like that, everybody's going to be into it, But play with confidence, but don't play with arrogance. Don't assume that you're going to go in there and win.
Play with confidence, not arrogance. I think that is a great way to put a period on the conversation right there. I like that. And I'm sure, as jazzed up as we are for this podcast, we have viewers that are jazzed up about it.
That's true.
On the Tech Sideline Podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm, the best producer in the land, Malcolm Stewart. Happy Thanksgiving to you, my man. What's going on?
All right, let's get into it. Matt Williams asks, if VT beats UVA, do you think the opportunity to upset Clemson is more realistic than some of their previous teams?
You know, it's weird. I haven't watched Clemson play once this year. Not one time.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Either I've been doing something else, or they're either playing in the middle of a Tech game, or what. But I haven't seen them play outside of highlights. They're a dominant defense. Again. I don't think their offense. The numbers might say otherwise. I really don't know, but this is my outside perception. I don't think their offense is quite as good as it was the last time they played Virginia Tech in the ACC championship game. Tech played Clemson better in that game than anybody expected. And I think Tech played Clemson as well as they could the next year, considering the personnel disadvantage Virginia Tech had on the offensive side of the ball. Yeah. I'll say this, before last week's game against Pitt, we said who's the most likely to win the division, Pitt, UVA, or Virginia Tech? And I said, well, put yourself in Clemson's shoes. Which one of those three teams would you least like to play? And the answer easily is Virginia Tech, because that's the only one of those three teams that would have a chance to score on Clemson. So I think the possibility exists, but I think it's about a 15 to 20% chance.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about this, so it's a good question. If Tech does beat UVA, what do I really think about their chances to beat Clemson? I was scared to death in 2016, and that ended up okay. Yeah. And Tech's quarterback back then was different, but he had the same effect on the team. He made the entire team better.
Talking about Gerard Evans.
Yeah, and if you remember, that game wasn't going well at all until Justin Fuente called for the fake punt.
Until my personal trainer became the NCAA's highest-rated quarterback.
That's right. Yeah, perfect rating. And then things kind of went Tech's way after that. When was the last time Clemson suffered what you would call a shocking upset?
Probably to Alabama in the college football playoff semifinals.
Was that
That's not a shocking upset.
Oh, good point. Sorry, I was thinking about the last time they really lost.
That Clemson game. Or no, the Clemson game. The Syracuse game.
Yeah, up at the Dome in 2016.
With Kelly Bryant.
That was 2016.
Yeah, but Syracuse went on to have a losing record that year.
I think they lost every game after that game.
Pitt beat them one time, right? Here's the thing. Anytime Clemson loses to anybody except for Alabama, it's a shocking upset because their talent level is just way better than anybody else's. All right, there's no way they should go through the regular season unless they're playing like a Virginia Tech and peak Virginia Tech year, that they should really lose a football game in the ACC. Their talent level is just so much higher than everybody else's right now.
I think if Virginia Tech winds up playing Clemson in the ACC championship game, I think it's going to be, for me anyway, it's going to be very interesting to watch and determine how motivated and how fired up I think Clemson is. Because, how many have they won in a row now? They've been to a bunch of college football playoffs. So at what point
they didn't lose last year, right? No, they didn't lose.
They went undefeated.
No,
right?
They ran the table.
Yeah.
At what point do you just kind of lose your concentration?
Law of averages.
And I actually thought about that as I started my answer.
That could be the title of today's podcast. The Law of averages.
Okay, I'll do that.
No.
At what point do you just start to lose your focus just a little too much?
Sure.
So
it's a great point.
I don't know if we're even answering the question, but I like the question.
Yeah.
I do too. It's one of those things. Honestly, Clemson could blow Tech out if they have their A game and Tech has a couple of unfortunate turnovers or something like that. But at the same time, Tech could also win the game if Clemson's not quite on.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine Tech knocking them out of the college football playoff and just that would be. We'll talk about that next week. How about that? We'll see. Well, let's get.
I'm sure the ACC would really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I think we basically already answered this, but Chris Grella, who's better right now, Hooker or Perkins?
I don't think Perkins is a great passer. I think he's a top-notch competitor, a really tough guy. I don't know that Hooker's a great passer either. I think the offense they're running for him is working really, really well. He's doing a good job executing it, but he's not the type that's going to drop back.
The phrase is drop. Sling it all over the yard.
Sling it all over the yard, go through his progressions, things like that. So I think for the offense he plays in, I think Hooker's better. I also think Perkins could do plenty of the same things Hooker does in Tech's offense.
Yeah.
So I think they're fairly similar. I think Hooker has a little bit better personnel around him, and I think he's better coached too.
Now I will say this: the times I have watched UVA play this year, Perkins is prone to, and again, don't at me, bro. I didn't watch all 11 games, but when I watch UVA, Perkins will make a throw where I just go, "Whoa, where was that?"
You got the stats right there. His
15 touchdowns, 8 interceptions.
It's a percentage of turnover-worthy plays.
Yes,
5%. So 1 out of every 20 plays.
Here you go. On the other end of the spectrum are turnover-worthy plays, and his rate there is pretty high at 5%, 11th out of 14 ACC quarterbacks.
So basically 1 out of every 20 plays he does something stupid.
Yeah.
So Tech will have about 3 chances at turnovers in this game at that rate.
Here and there he does make throws where you're just like, "Whoa, what was that?"
Right.
Right. And you don't really see that from Hooker.
They
don't put him in that position.
You don't see that from Hooker because, for the most part, outside the Pittsburgh game, we've been able to run the football, and we're not sitting back there at 3rd and 14. And when we do sit back there in 3rd and 14, we don't do something stupid like throw the ball over the middle, with a quarterback who hasn't ever really been asked to do that yet in his career. And with as good a defense as Tech has, you just run a draw and punt it, and because you got a great punt team, win the field position game. And Frank, I know it sounds boring, but it's effective. That's how you win games.
Oh, by the way, UVA's punter only averages about 41 yards a punt. Bradburn, if he's got the whole field to work with in good conditions, averages 48. So here we are again.
They still rank number 1 in the country in FEI special teams.
UVA does?
UVA does.
Oh, wow.
No, as far as PFF goes, Tech is 3rd in the conference, UVA is 6th. But because it's tough to rank special teams. Yeah. But as far as I can tell, there's not a huge discernible difference.
Well, UVA is probably getting big returns out of Reed, right?
Yeah,
is that one of
maybe,
the things?
Yeah.
All right.
Sherrod Tatum, do you expect UVA to run some trick plays that they haven't shown so far?
Oh, it's the last game of the season. You
can't
hold anything back, right?
Well, Chris told you it's going to come from that backup quarterback.
They ran a fake punt against Liberty last week. And
that's just putting it on film.
That's putting it on film to give Virginia Tech something to think about, I guess. I wouldn't have done it. I think that'll make Tech sit back and punt safe a lot, and maybe UVA thinks they can pick up a few extra yards in a field position that way and stuff. But yeah, you got to watch it out for their backup quarterback who will get on the field some, as a protector on the punt team and throw the ball and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, but it wouldn't surprise me if Tech had one prepared too.
Well,
against that aggressive UVA front.
Remember, Tech ran that trick play down on the goal line. Was it against Georgia Tech where they tried to throw to him?
Tavion throwback.
Yeah, they tried the Ken Dorsey play.
Right, that's exactly what I thought. Yep. Willie Pyle wasn't there to pick it off and run it all the way back. But I wonder if Tech could show that same thing and then do something different.
Different, right?
Good question.
All right, sort of a combined question from Eric Fisher and Chris Grella. How do you contain Perkins? Do you spy him with one of your linebackers? Is he more dangerous in or out of the pocket? Just how do you handle him? I
think you depend on your defensive tackles getting penetration, and you tell your defensive ends, don't get undisciplined. Make sure you contain him in the pocket, and then you try to time your blitzes wisely. I think that's the main thing.
It's the old Nebraska game plan against Tyrod Taylor, which they executed incredibly well.
Yeah.
Don't let him get outside for sure. And at the same time, try to figure out a way to not give him a lot of room to maneuver in the middle, because I don't like one-on-one situations with Perkins.
For sure.
Make sure it's crowded.
The good thing about this is, Tech doesn't have elite pass rushing defensive ends. They have very, very average to below average defensive ends as pass rushers to go. They're good players, but they're not good pass rushers. So there's really no point in telling them to, okay, guys,
dial it back.
It's third date. You really go after the quarterback because they're probably not going to get there anyway.
It's going to look about the same.
Right, so you just got to kind of rush them up the field, try to get them in the right spot.
Well, now, wait a minute. Remember, one of UVA's tackles is really struggling, so that could be different.
It's their left tackle, so that'll be Belmore.
All right.
Right.
Did we answer? We sort of answered it.
No, that was great. No, that was fantastic.
So.
Yeah. Troy Shiflett Does it hurt Tech if we, very hypothetically, if we beat UVA, beat Clemson, does that hurt our chance at a bowl?
No.
It's an
Doesn't
automatic
make
bid.
It's an
Bowl
automatic
worse.
bid to the Orange Bowl if that happens.
Yeah.
See, the ACC champion gets the Orange Bowl. The
No
only
matter
way the
what.
ACC champion doesn't get the Orange Bowl is if the ACC champion goes to the playoffs, in which case the next highest ranked ACC team gets the Orange Bowl. So if you beat UVA, and then unless the pollsters do something insane and drop Tech way down the rankings and push Wake up ahead of us.
But Wake lost again last week, right?
No, they beat Duke.
There's just the only team.
they're
The
9-3.
only team that's within range of Tech in the rankings is UVA,
Right.
And by design in this discussion,
Yeah.
you're beating them.
So to me, I don't think there's any way Tech ends up in another bowl except the Orange Bowl unless they lose to UVA.
Yeah.
It's Orange Bowl or I don't know, Belk Bowl or something.
So there's
like that.
not a scenario where winning the ACC is going to get you bumped from the Orange Bowl.
Right.
I think is what he's asking.
Right. Yeah.
So again, just to put it out there in a broader term, you beat UVA, you're going to the Orange Bowl.
Apparently so.
It's what it seems like. Yeah.
So the idea of doing the Tech Sideline podcast on a yacht in Miami lives on for another week.
Yeah, it does.
Let me check the budget.
How about one more, Malcolm?
I think that's.
Was that about it?
I think that's about it.
Awesome. Great question. Those are really good questions. Every week they come prepared. All right. Well, again, it is Thanksgiving week. I already asked Chris earlier about what the it looks like we're gonna have an article at 3 a.m. tomorrow on Thanksgiving. If you can't sleep,
Yeah, if you happen to be up at 3:00 tomorrow morning, go ahead and check out my basketball game recap, which I guarantee you will be one of the shortest articles I've ever written.
so instead of what's to come on TSL, how about this? What's already on the website right now that people can read here over the next
A
couple
bunch
days?
of content yesterday. We had Eric Carr write an article about what the passing game looks like with Hendon Hooker, what's working, what they're not asking him to do,
Cool.
things like that.
I actually haven't had a chance to read that yet.
It's very good. And then you've got Brandon Patterson's film review of Pitt and also his film review of what to expect from the UVA game.
Okay.
Lots of good stuff.
And Patterson
yesterday.
is not only very analytical, he's very entertaining.
Very
So
entertaining also, yes. Yeah. And then later this afternoon we'll have our game preview out, which will be basically everything we just talked about on the podcast.
Yeah, it's what is it? It's 1:20 in the afternoon. We got to crunch the podcast together. A game preview will probably be out 3:30, 4 o'clock this
something like
afternoon.
that. Yep.
Great. Do want to shout out real quick. So that's what's coming on Tech Sideline. I kind of do like a Olympic sports update and some of the other sports sides, men's basketball.
What's going on with soccer?
That's what I was going to bring up. So men's soccer knocked off a really, really good New Hampshire team,
By a
4-1.
Yeah.
They went down 1-0. They responded in 3 minutes to tie it. And then they ended up scoring 2 more. It was a really complete team.
The crazy thing is Wisconsin has won so many games, or they only lost one game all year, something like that.
In men's soccer?
Yeah. But the Tech's schedule has been so difficult that
They
New
had the
Hampshire was
second-
probably like the third worst team they played.
Men's soccer, the second highest ranked schedule in the country, or strength of schedule. It's the second toughest in the nation.
Probably beaten only by another ACC team. I mean,
Yep.
it's got to be
Sure.
ACC.
So they beat New Hampshire, and then they got the winner of Seattle and the 7th seed Stanford. The Hokies are the 10 seed. Seattle and Stanford went to PKs, and Stanford prevailed and advanced on PKs. So the Hokies go to Stanford in the round of 16 on Sunday afternoon. They get the winner of Providence and the number 2 overall seed Clemson. If they were to win that, the Elite Eight. So men's soccer, that's consecutive years. They're in the Sweet 16. And a big shout out to Mike Brizendine and the men's soccer program. So, all right. Well, guys, first off, hope you guys enjoy your Thanksgivings. Hope you get to sleep late, and as you said.
Don't worry.
Will, I hope you eat lots of stuffing and enjoy your
pick at a little turkey.
What do you have people over to your house? Is that what you do?
Yeah, not a lot. Not many this year. Malcolm and his brother and sister are home. His sister's home because she's still in high school. My sister and her husband are here, and I think we're going to have a niece, and that's about it. So
Awesome.
Not a huge crew, which I kind of like it that way.
Yeah,
I like it to be a little bit more controlled.
Well, I'm curious to ask you guys on Monday if you guys do any backyard football or whatever. Who's the MVP of the Stewart Turkey Bowl, or could see Malcolm
It would
slinging
have
a
to be
rock in the
Malcolm.
backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's nodding his head. Well, listen, to all of the TSLers out there, happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your friends and family, and then get ready for game day on Friday. Hokies, Cavaliers, 12 o'clock kick on ABC. We'll break it all down on Monday's edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Again, enjoy the game. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. That'll do it for our podcast today. of our producer behind the scenes, Malcolm Stewart, on the podcast set, our managing editor, Chris Coleman, our founder and head honcho, Will Stewart. I'm Evan Hughes saying so long. Happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you on Monday right here on the Tech Sideline Podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm.